How's it going, ladies and gents? Welcome to a video on code tech tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about getting the Ogre3d rendering system up and going with C++. So I'm just going to walk you through it. I'm going to talk about building it from source. You can go get the binaries, but I think building it from source is the way to do it if you're going to use it in one of your projects, because you can get the most up-to-date version and you can change little things if you want to and stuff like that. So while their website is here, and you can go to downloads and download Ogre. I'm not sure what OGRE-NEXT is. It might just be something further. But this one, well, this way, yeah, you can get the source code here. It looks like it's off GitHub and comes in a zip. And there's the SDKs. But like I said, we're going to be building it from source. So we're going to go over to GitHub, github.com, and we're just going to search for Ogre. And here we'll see Ogre Cave, Ogre3d, or just Ogre. And this is it. So as you can see, this has been updated 2 days ago. So this is in active development. What we're going to do is just copy the link here, and we want to clone it. Now, if you don't want to deal with GitHub and cloning, then you can download the zip of the file, probably in releases over here. But we're going to talk about cloning it so we can get the latest version. So make sure you copy that. And then you want to clone it with whatever you have. I'm using Windows here, clearly. I'm going to be using Fork. So with Fork is just a free GitHub thing. Go to File, Clone, and paste it in. Make sure you got your folders how you want them, and it clones. So as you can see here, I've already cloned it, and I've got it downloaded. So now that I have it downloaded, what you want to do next is operate off the CMake file, because as you can see here, it does use CMake. So I'm actually just going to minimize this for now, and I'm going to go open my CMake. This is the CMake GUI. So what you want to do is just browse to your source, wherever you downloaded it. I have it in repos Ogre, and hit select, and then you want to browse to a build. Now I'm using a pretty standard build location. Let's see, where is it? Okay, I'm already in it. Yeah, so under repos, Ogre, you can build it wherever you want, but the standard is into a folder called alt and then into a folder called build. There you go, same place, just make those two folders. Or sometimes people just use build, but the Windows default seems to want to be alt/build. So it's pretty standard for Windows right there. And then all you do is you hit configure over here next. And once it's done configuring, it will take a while. Hopefully it has no errors. If it does have any errors, go look at them. It might say you need some sort of driver or something if you don't have your drivers updated, but most likely it will be fine. So when you do hit configure, it isn't going to ask you for what. Yeah, it says I'm missing some Python stuff, so I can't use that. And you hit generate. And you want to also make sure you generate it from Microsoft Visual Studio. You don't see the pop-up here because I've already done it, but it'll pop up and ask you at some point what your generator is, and you can see mine here is already Visual Studio 16 2019. So you just want to pick the same thing, or if you're watching this from the past, it might be a newer version of Visual Studio, or watching this from the future. I don't know. There's a little inception going on right there. So once it's done configuring and generating, you can just open it with Visual Studio, and you can click this button right here to do it, or let me close my current project here. So if you click this button, it should just open the solution file with Visual Studio, and you should have it all ready. And what you'll see here is something that looks like this. You can go to switch views, folder view. Looks like it's taking a second to switch. There we go. Or switch views. And one of these is, well, I'm not seeing it here. Okay. let's do this a different way. So apparently that open does something a little weird. Let's take a look here. The big thing is, I want you to be able to figure out how to get around these weird errors, but we should see something like a all build and stuff like that. I'm not seeing that here, so I'm gonna just open Visual Studio on its own. And let's see, open a project or solution, and then we'll just go to it. Wherever you downloaded it to. Ogre, and then wherever you built it to. Alt, build, and you should see a ogre.sln. And when you open there, you'll get the full project. This is the same thing. I'm just not seeing the all build and all that stuff for some reason. Okay, it switches to ogre.solution. Okay, it's just in this folder. CMake predefined targets. Now it might not be in a folder, these might be in separate areas here. So the first thing you generally want to do is an all build. So you want to right click on this and just click build, or since it's default, it's the bold one, you can go up here and you build, or you can use the hotkey. However you want to build it, you basically want to just build everything. Now this is going to take a while, so you might want to go get you a cup of coffee or whatever while it's building. If I hit this, it should go pretty quick because I've already done it. I'll basically just say 28 up to date. Now when this is done, you should get a message at the bottom that tells you how many succeeded. If you have failures, you'll need to address those. I didn't have any when I built it, it just built fine, so that was cool. Other things that are real obvious that I haven't mentioned, like, of course you need Visual Studio, so it's free, just go get it. And make sure you get the C++ packages with it when you update it and all that. Alright, so it runs, yeah, Visual Studio also has some CMake integration, so of course you need CMake. I didn't really mention all that because it's just obvious. Okay, so another real important thing here is you also want to build this install. This install actually sets up the SDK. This all build is just all the source code and everything. This install is what puts the SDK on your folder, in your little Ogre output folder. As you can see, I'm getting all these up-to-date messages because I've already done it. But this is what you actually need to put it in your project and work with it in your project. Well, you need both. But the SDK is also very important. You won't be able to continue with your project if you don't have it. So once you're done building all these, you can actually just exit, or just actually, go to File, New, Project. And I'm going to show you now how to use Ogre now that you've got it built. So let's start with an empty project. And we'll just call it Ogre tutorial. Now I'm really only going to go through the very start of this tutorial. I'll show you where to take it further, but there's no need for me to go through a ton because it's all documented. So I'm just really showing you the parts that aren't documented very well, like this whole building and setting up. There's no guide to doing this on Windows, even though it's pretty straightforward. The guide they do have is all about Linux, really, which is fine too. Okay, so now I've got just a blank Visual Studio. I'm going to go ahead and switch this to Release and 64. And the reason I'm doing that, I kind of glazed over this before, but I'll say it now, is when I was building Ogre, I built it as Release and 64. So all the libraries and DLLs that it built for the Ogre SDK and everything were in Release 64. So you want your project to match. If you built in Debug 86 or Release 86, then your project has to match, or you can go back and build the other versions. So they just have to match. The libraries have to match. It's just a C++ thing. You can't use x86 libraries with 64 and stuff like that. And you might be able to use debug ones, but it'll probably give you a bunch of error messages. I'm not sure. You should just match them up. And release with dev info or min size release is fine. It'll work with release as well. I'm not going to get into the nuances of that. Alright, so what we're going to do here is just make a main file. I'm just going to right click somewhere and just go to add new item. And we'll just make a C++ file, and I'm just going to name it, and you should probably do the same, just main.cvp. So of course we'll do an include, well, it's going to be Ogre, right? You're going to include Ogre. Or actually, don't include anything yet. Just put a main in here because it's going to be all Ogre stuff, and we're going to make a class to handle all that. So then we're going to make another folder here. Add class, and we'll just make this class name the Ogre, whatever. Just going to be our implementation basically. So I'll just call it Ogre. Let's call it Ogre-Imp. Sounds good to me. All right, now the rest of this here, we're actually going to go to a tutorial. So I'm going to go back into Chrome here, go back into the Ogre. And here they've got documentation, API reference, and there's a bunch of stuff here. Now if you go right to tutorials over here, you'll start getting some how to use it. Now that you've got it built, you should be able to generally go through these tutorials. So there's a guide to building Ogre. We already went through this. It gives you some Linux steps, so if you're doing it on Linux, some of these will work. It doesn't really talk about Windows on here. I guess you could kind of adapt it, but it doesn't really talk about the way I did it at all. So looks like you can build it as a Visual Studio package, VC package. So that's pretty interesting too. That's a whole nother way of doing it. Since I'm building it from source, since I just walked through building it from source, we're going to skip over all this. And now here it talks about setting up your first Ogre project, and it basically tells you a CMake version of it. Now I've done some recent tutorials on CMake, but we're not going to be using it. We're just going to be using Visual Studio stuff right now. If you're using CMake, you should be able to figure this out if you're familiar with CMake. But the important things to extract from here is it has a target link libraries. It says Ogre bits and Ogre-RT shader system. So it's given us a pretty good hint here of what we need to be linking in our project. So while it doesn't talk about Visual Studio here, we can still abstract out of here what we need to set up in our linker and all of that. So let's go ahead and do that. Ogre bytes, Ogre RT shader system. All right, so back into Visual Studio here, we're going to right click and go to properties. There's a bunch of different ways just to get to properties here, but you basically want to go to your project properties. And in here, you'll go, let's see, we're going to need to do a few things here. We're going to go to the linker, and in general, there's an additional library directories. So for now, we're just going to path this standard way, click the folder, click these little things, and go to the repo where you built Ogre. Repo, or where you downloaded it. It should just be lowercase Ogre. That's how it came out for me. And we want to look for includes, which are in Ogre main. Include, there it is. And there's a few others we need in here too. So click this again, click this again, go back to the same spot. And we're also going to need components. And there's the bits or bytes, and include. And we're going to do this once again, go back to the same spot. Ogre, components, and RT shader system. So if you start using other of these parts as you go on, you're going to need to add them as well. And I think that's actually, there's one more I know we're going to need, and it's one for the version that we built. So you'll also go into it again, this time to alt build and include, because this has a version config in the build. Oops, and I accidentally overwrote one of mine, so I need to add that back in. I'll just go ahead and do that real quick. There was the shader system that I overwrote accidentally. Yep, okay. So now we should have basically these 4. And that should be good. We'll go ahead and apply that. Oops. Those were supposed to be library directories, or include directories. I put them in the library. That's fine. We can just copy all these, I believe. Just going to do a little notepad hack here. Now I'm going to need them, so I'm just going to open up Notepad and paste them in. Doesn't let you multi-select, so I'm doing it this way. Alright, so actually what we need here in the foobar this. Alright, well, hopefully I don't make it too confusing, but in the linker additional library directories, we need the library locations, which is sort of similar. Into the repo, into Ogre, but these are built, so we go to alt, build, live, and that's it. Hit OK. This is where all the static libraries are. Alright, and under C++, the one above linker, this is where you need, and then under general, this is where you need all the additional include directories. So we'll add all these in. I don't know if it's going to let me put them all in at once. It'd be cool if it did. See if it does. No, it doesn't seem to let me. So we'll just put all these in. We'll just do them one at a time. That one. Add another one. It's not letting me paste. I guess I didn't cut correctly or something. Cut. There we go. So I was hitting the wrong key. But yeah, we basically just want to get all these added in here. And the last one there. Oops. Okay. There we go. Okay, apply. So that was in C++ general. Hope that's not too confusing. All right, and in the linkers, we do want to link. So that's under input. So now that it points to where the libraries are, we can actually now just put these dependencies in here. And they're just like they said on that tutorial, basically. Let's see. Here we are. Ogre bits and the Ogre3d shader system. So we're going to need both of those linked. And they do need to be on separate lines, and they do need .live on them. .live. And if we need any more, we'll go in there and add them. That should be good. So there's also going to be the DLLs, because this does have runtime DLLs. And I'll get that a little later. Actually, heck, let's just do it now while we're setting up everything else. So what you want to do here is just go open your file explorer, go to where you built it, repos, Ogre, alt, build, and bin. Under bin here, well, I built as min size release, so that's where they're all going to be. If you build as debug or release or whatever, you'll find them in there too. So these are the types that match your build. And I just did a sort by type so I could see all the DLLs. And you just want to grab all the DLLs here. And you want to do a copy. So however you want to copy these. Basically want to copy them into your project directory. I'm just going to right click on this, open in File Explorer, and here we go. So this is like the root of the project, but then there's a name folder here, and this is where you want them to be. It's going to look a little messy. Organize if you want, but basically these DLLs just need to be on the root. And yeah, these are shared libraries. So there might be another way of doing it where you reference them from your development libraries, but a lot of them need to ship with your software because likely whoever you're shipping it to will need the runtime stuff. They probably won't have all this Ogre stuff on their computer. So you might as well get it in their project. But some of them are huge, like this one's 4 meg, this one's about 3 meg. You don't necessarily want to be uploading them to GitHub and stuff like that because they're not going to change very often. But that's kind of up to you. You want to do that. But now that they're in there, once we're done building, it will run without an error. If you get a DLL error, you didn't do the step, basically. You didn't get them in here in the right place. Okay, there's also another thing that we're going to get into here in a second. Ogre uses config files, and we'll see those. Let's see here. You actually see those in your build. See tests, samples, resources, plugins. We will need the plugins and resources, so I'm going to go ahead and copy those over, and those go in the same place as the DLL. So there we go. Just going to paste them on in there. And if you don't have them, you'll find out later because it'll say it won't be able to find the models. Basically, these default ones here that built with it, they point to some of the SDK models and demo meshes and stuff like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into that tutorial a little bit further now that we've sorted all that out. So we went through the configuration, we linked all this stuff. Here it points to, well, they do a file copy of the resources here. We're going to need that. I guess we don't necessarily need the plugins yet, but so what we just did there was basically that. And of course, they just add an executable. So this CMake thing is very similar to what we just did, basically. Okay, so it now kind of gives you a setup to build an application skeleton. And it gives you some code. It basically has you build a little class that extends application context and the input listener. So this will get you a window and your rendering surface basically, and then some stuff so you can set up keys. So it's a very default little place to render with a window, and it uses SDL2 for the window. If you want to use a different windowing system, you can. Just the default one here is SDL2. And then it has you set up the class with a key press where the escape key will basically end the scene. And it also does a setup that basically initializes everything. So really what we can do is just copy all of this, or we can build it out, however you want to do it. So I'm just going to do it like this. I'm going to move to the side, move this over here, and yeah, we've got our main files. We've got them all up here tabbed, so I'm just going to collapse this on down. And in the .h file, we basically want to make sure we get this class set up correctly. So we're going to need to put this extension on it. We're not using the mytest app name, we're using Ogre-Imp. Or we'll put it on a new line so you can actually see it. As you can see, we need to do some includes. It doesn't know what this Ogre byte stuff is, so we need to include. And it should see it here since we did all the properties. There's Ogre. I think we actually need Ogre bytes. And it should be happy. It's not happy. Okay. So if you want the full list of source code here for what we're actually doing, it's actually in your build. So back where you built Ogre, or just actually on the default repo, there is a samples area. Down at the bottom there's a tutorials, and the bootstrap one right here is actually all the code. So I'm just going to make this a little simpler and just put it all in one file. I don't want to be sitting here typing all day. So we're going to delete this class that I started making. Delete. And I guess this is good practice if you want to know how to mess around with files here in Visual Studio, if nothing else. So we're just going to open this. I'm just going to do an edit so it opens with different software. And there it is. So I'm just going to do a copy and a paste. And now you'll see that there is a main on the bottom here. So we do have this main in here, but above it we basically just have the full class. There is the header for the class right there. And here is all the definitions of everything. There's the key press thing, and there's that setup. And you can see, you can walk through all of what this setup does. And there's the main. So now we can actually build and run this. And let's just go ahead and do it. Let's just hit this debugger here, which should build it, and if there's no errors, it'll run it right away. Now, it does give a bunch of warnings. See there, yeah, a bunch of warnings. And here we get in, so ignore all the warnings. Those are all just a part of Ogre, not really something you can do about, unless you want to edit their source code and make a pull request to Ogre, but we're not getting into that. So we do have an error at the bottom. This is the only important thing here. And it says cannot open input file ogre bytes.lib. So we do have to address that. So let's just go back into our properties and see what we did wrong. Ogre bytes.lib, that looks fine. Let's go ahead and go back to general. Edit. Let's just double check that this library is correct. This path to it. Ogre out build live. There it is. Oh, okay, we have to go further down in lib into min size release because that's what we built. So that's the error. We just had to go one folder deeper. Now it should be fine because it just wasn't in that directory. So now let's go ahead and go to build again. And it looks like it's a little bit better, but we are still seeing an error. It's with the Ogre scene node. We haven't linked to the Ogre library. Apparently they didn't need to do that in their tutorial, but here you definitely do. So we'll go back into properties. Essentially the same thing. We're just going to add 2 additional dependencies in here, and we're now going to put ogre main.lib. That should take care of it. And there, it looks good. We got a 1 succeeded. So now if we hit play, we should get our initial bootstrap. And since we've already copied in the config and DLLs, it's not going to crash. If you get a crash, it should tell you either something about a config or a DLL. And there we go. We got this little Sinbad dude. And if you hit escape, it exits. Now the first time it pops up is going to prompt you for a rendering setup probably. It might. So you'll get to choose on a little screen. You didn't see that here because I've already ran it, I think. Not entirely sure. But you might get a pop-up that asks you what you want to render with. All right, and that's basically it. So you can go further with this. You can, this is just the very intro, getting the hello world going. But as you saw, there were other tutorials in that folder. Oh, we're in this folder. There's a 1 and then a 2. Then you can back up and there's other stuff in here. But what I would recommend is walking through this. So there we go. So we did all this basically. We went through this whole setting up your Ogre project. So next would be your first scene, and then it starts getting into scenes and entities. And then you can go to lights, cameras, shadows, terrains, sky, fog, and you can basically go the whole route and learn Ogre. So let me know if you have any questions below. Let me know if you have any trouble. I'll see what I can do to help. I have not tested this directly on Linux yet. I'm probably going to do that at a later date. But I hope these steps were good enough. I did kind of do it on the fly. I really just built all this and did this a couple hours ago, and then decided, I'll go ahead and make a video. And yeah, I feel like this was necessary because I could not really find any sort of video tutorials about this. And yeah, I just remember when I was new to C++ and trying to get this going, I could not figure it out. So I hope this helps someone out there that is stuck. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Peace out, guys.